In our journey over the past 5 days, we've considered 5 different pictures or shadows of Jesus. The Passover lamb, water, manna bread, a large portable tent known as a tabernacle, and then quite surprisingly a snake that pictured Jesus. On today's journey, we consider a 6th and final picture of Jesus, the Promised Land of Canaan. This promised land pictures the peace, the prosperity, and the rest of eternal paradise that Jesus promises to all who follow him. The prophet Ezekiel recalls the promise God made to Abraham and repeated to Moses about bringing his people into this promised land. On that day I swore to them that I would bring them out of Egypt and into a land I had searched out for them, a land flowing with milk and honey, the most beautiful of all lands. God was dwelling with his people as they journeyed through the wilderness. But life was hard. This 40-year period was a time of trial and testing. The Israelites had food and water, but physically speaking, that was about it. The wilderness was a vast void. It was a sprawling acreage of wasteland. Food and water were scarce. Poisonous snakes were plentiful. Intense heat was hard to escape. Plants and animals and people alike struggled to survive in that kind of environment. What a contrast to the promised land of Canaan that Joshua, the successor of Moses, was leading them into. Canaan was the most beautiful and glorious of all lands. The Bible describes it as a land flowing with milk and honey. Milk and honey might seem quite ordinary to us, but in the Bible, they represent gourmet goods. They represent all that is most desirable and delightful. And if you think about it, the most expensive drinks still today at your local cafe are those milk-based lattes. And who doesn't like whipped cream, cream cheese, and ice cream? As for honey, it represents all that is sweet. In the Promised Land, the Israelites would enjoy wheat and wine, barley and bread, grapes and olives, figs, pomegranates, not to mention the minerals and precious metals that they could mine from the ground. And they would enjoy all these good gifts in abundant quantity. Just as a river continuously flows with life-giving water, so this land would bring a continuous flow of all these good gifts. And the unceasing supply would provide God's people with not just what they needed, but so much beyond. From this abundance of God's blessing, they could export these goods and become the center of a global economy. What a contrast to their meager diet as slaves in Egypt. What a change from the bare necessities of water and manna bread in the wilderness. The wilderness was a picture of hardship, danger, and God's displeasure. But the promised land of Canaan was a picture of prosperity and peace and pleasure. More importantly, the promised land was a picture of paradise. Joshua led the Israelites into the beautiful promised land of Canaan. And this land pictured the paradise that Adam and Eve had once enjoyed for a brief while. But it also pictures the eternal paradise that Jesus is preparing for all who trust in him. Through his death, resurrection, and ascension into heaven, Jesus brings us out of slavery to sin, out of the wilderness of this world, and into his presence in the promised land of the new heavens and new earth, where there is eternal pleasure forevermore at his right hand. Thank God for the cosmic scope of his saving work. And praise God that he is redeeming not just our souls, but also our bodies and the whole of creation in all of its diversity and beauty.